Language coaching is one of the most important roles a teacher can take on. The first and foremost, you need to be able to set that safe environment for students to feel comfortable, to take academic risks, encourage them to access the content, the language of the discipline. Most importantly, creating time for them to rehearse and practice with those responses. Transitioning from the informal to the formal register is vital because once they can speak academically, you're going to see that show up in their writing. Language coaching is a progression. It starts with verbal cues, allowing students to become familiar with those cues and progress into physical cues.
I noticed two things, so can somebody else give me more and tell me what else are we looking for?
I think it means that we are supposed to be able to examine and read any type of text.
Yeah, so we're supposed to be able to, and then what was the verb you used?
Examine.
Yeah, examine. So we're able to examine.
I agree with Marcella because parents should like the way their kids are born.
Thank you, Maria. I love how you built on what you said by adding a new piece of information to improve that statement, the conversation. Thank you very much.
There is an overlap time where you're using both at the same time if you're asking for that complete sentences or referring back to the text.
I think they were unsuccessful because after the Haymarket affair, the Knights of Labor were no longer working.
Okay. Is there any evidence that you have from anything that we've read before that would support that?
Yeah, in the document, Albert Parsons and the Haymarket.
The whole idea is as the students become familiar with those verbal cues and you transition, there's no longer the need to interrupt.
Natalie, go ahead and share what you and your team decided was important.
5 pennies. One key word that my group and I came up with was 5 pennies.
So the role of the teacher becomes less dominant than the student role. A really neat aspect of the language coaching is when you see the students take ownership of themselves as well as the class in general, and the heavy lifting becomes more on the students, taking onus to own the language, to think critically, and grapple with complex text.
Sentence streams are a scaffold that help accelerate a student's acquisition of academic language. When you tier them, you could provide different levels of complexity, so it can go from very simple sentence streams to more sophisticated ones. When you have the opportunity to provide students with different levels of sentence streams, it gives them another sense of ownership because they're really able to think about their own current level of articulation and which sentence stream would best suit their need. Alex, thank you.
I agree with Victoria, and I'd like to add on another thing we need to look for is complete sentences.
Another scaffold that we use in the classroom is called a word bank, and it's when you provide students with a list of either academic vocabulary words or also content-specific words. The purpose of the word bank is to have students practice those specific words so that they could find greater success with the content that's being discussed in the classroom. And since they have the constant access to those words, they will continue to practice them with their discussions in class and in their writing as well, so that they could really take ownership and they can really integrate those words specifically into their own vocabulary, and that way their vocabulary will expand so that they could also use it in other contexts.
I agree with Kimberly, and I would also like to add on that the boy might also be trying to look for a path that might guide him or help him.
Excellent job building on. Can you give me a little more though and tell me